All right. So we'll do the forward, or excuse me, we'll do the intermediate. So here's your intermediate piston. This is another piston that likes to fight you on the way in. I actually grabbed the incorrect lip seal there. So here is the seal for the direct drum. It's the center seal, and we're going to leave it out, but I'll show you how to quickly tell them apart. So in my right is the intermediate, and my left is the direct. You see how the groove is biased toward the right side for the intermediate, but more or less in the center, or mostly in the center, more centered than for the direct. More centered. So, at a glance, if you're not paying attention like I wasn't, you'll mix them up. Alright, get as much lube as you can on this thing, and then you're just going to line your spring bosses with their respective pockets. And there's no special orientation, you just, whichever pockets you want to line up, as long as they're aligned. So go all the way around, and a little bit of downward pressure, and it'll seat eventually. That's what I like to say when it comes to all these apply pistons. They'll seat eventually. Okay, that one didn't give me too much trouble. So here is the much thicker CK Performance backing plate for the return springs. These are the high rate return springs, and so we're going to install them. And I think I'm going to actually seat this snap ring on the shop press, not the foot press. So I just install all of them. And then it's, roughly centered over it. I mean, that's, how you want it. All right, I'm gonna go to the press. Try to use these pliers. If not, I'm gonna have to grab some bigger ones if they're not gonna work. them off center. Okay, you got the snap ring groove exposed. All right. All right, back to the bench. All right, you're gonna see me use another special tool, another sizer. Now, if you don't have the sizing tool, which is this Kentmore J38736-7, then you can use the interlock rings. So there's no expander tool. We're just slipping them on and sizing them up once we got them in the groove. Kind of go all around, work your way. And then for the bottom one, you want to actually turn the sizing tool upside down. So do the best you can to size it by hand a little bit, just to get it started, and then introduce your sizing tool. And you have to go at it a few times, you know, it's almost like you gotta sneak up on it. In fact, this is one of those times where I'll put some lube. And like anything else, you don't wanna be too impatient, you don't wanna force nothing. But this is a relatively low risk proposition, especially even for, like, you know, new builders, because the you know, the interlock rings are just, you know, I mean, they take 2 seconds to install. And for pretty much any application, they'll be fine. Like I said, I have a preference or a bias for these one-piece Teflon rings, but if you don't have the sizing tool, at least working on TH400 4L80E, then don't worry about it. Boom, 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 boom. I can't really criticize. When I was a kid, I used to have a booming system myself. Had a hatchback and 2 amps in there. One was an Orion NT 250 HCCA, and it was bridged down to, like, I want to say either 1 ohm mono or 2 ohm stereo. It was putting out like over 1200 watts of power. Crazy. And a bandpass with one 15-inch Orion NT sub. And then I had a Phoenix Gold 4-channel for my components and back speakers. I'm surprised I'm not deaf. The second ring, you can go upside down or downside up. It doesn't really matter. The main thing is you want to make sure that you're not clipping it. Okay, we're gonna leave this ring off. So that just leaves the top ring. Okay, we're going to install our seal here, but you just want to take a quick look. Make sure that there's no debris or, you know, other matter in there that can prevent coolant, or I should say return lube flow, because this is the source of the gear train's lube. So these Laser 4 LEDs 97 and up, they routed the return fluid to lube the gear train first. All right, let me get a little bushing driver and I put that in. So you just want to get it centered to the best of your ability. You want to make sure that the top of the seal is slightly below flush with the housing. Or with respect to the housing, I should say. Just check it, make sure you can't wiggle it out. Thrust washer. Just going to go back there. And you can just leave that in there for now. Okay, so here is your high reverse, here is your direct. So when we dual feed in the case, we're going to plug the location in the case that corresponds to this location here in the center support. Some guys will put a check ball in here and, you know, plug it that way. I'll be honest, I'm generally not a fan of that. I prefer to just plug the case. And when I do so, I'll use some RTV or some sealant all the way around the little cup plug. And that's you know, this plug right here. And that should keep it from, you know, dislodging or leaking or, you know, whatever. Okay, just check these springs, make sure that they're kind of straight to the extent and they're not poking out. They don't have to be absolutely perfect, but you don't want them totally distorted either. Okay, and we go do the air check. If there's a problem, you know, we'll know it. Okay, I'm gonna get the air compressor turned on, and then we'll set everything up to do clutch clearance checks. So we'll test the direct drum through the center support, and then we gotta test the forward drum and the coast clutch drum, you know, through the pump or with the pump. So for me to do that, first what I'll need to do is measure with like a little dial caliper the distance between the ledge where this pressure plate sits and the top of the friction. And what I usually do is measure in like 4 spots and just average them, and then I'll add that figure to the actual travel that I measure when I produce air, and you know how far that pressure plate rises, and those 2 figures added together will be your clutch clearance. All right, stand by, and then once I get set up with the compressor and dial indicator and all that whatnot, we'll proceed. All right, got everything together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the calipers, and then I'm going to measure at like 4 different spots, 4 different ledges, you know, 3, 6, 9, and 12 position, and then kind of, you know, hastily average that out. And then from there, we'll put the pressure plate and snap ring back in, apply the clutch with the dial indicator on top, and then we'll measure that travel and just add them 2 together, and that will be the clearance. I think I mentioned before, but this drum, I like to see between 50 and 70 thou on a 5 clutch stack. On the higher side if we're doing 6 clutches. And I don't really do 6 clutches until like horsepower levels exceed 750 and, you know, in a race situation. Otherwise they're not necessary in my opinion. Okay, so zero your indicator, get as steady as you possibly can on the ledge, and then just drop it down until it stops. So this is telling me about 27 thousandths. So that's where I measured it. So we'll go 90 degrees, do the same thing. It's telling me 30 thou. So basically 28 and a half. .32 thou. So let's call it 29. And then one more. Hey, 30 thou. So I'm gonna call it 29 thousandths. So that's a figure that we'll add to whatever figure we get when we actually measure the travel. I can figure out how to get the pressure plate in. So just do the best you can to get it as straight as you can. Let me see if I can change the camera angle so you can actually see the indicator a little bit clearer. And we're going to introduce air doesn't really matter which one, but that's where, you know, either one of these two is where you want the air to go. This is going to be intermediate, so it's going to be either high reverse or direct. And you're just looking for that pack to apply. Okay, got the dial indicator centered. Because we're dual feeding, we want to make sure that if we choose this hole, we plug this one with our finger or thumb and vice versa. So I'm going to plug this hole and I'm going to put air in the high reverse. Okay, so that's about 32 thousandths, and I think we said 30 thousandths was our, you know, our kind of averaged measurement. So it's like 62 thou. We'll do it one more time just to be sure. And I'm coming off of the hole. Alright, so I'm reasonably satisfied that the clearance is what it needs to be for the direct. So now I'm going to set up the forward drum and the coast clutch drum on the pump, and then we'll do the same thing, go through the same process. Unlike the direct drum and the forward drum, this drum you don't need to, you know, do any kind of measurements to compensate for a ledge or anything like that. And I'm going to move the camera so you can see the dial indicator a little bit better. Okay, I want to put air here. When I say here, I mean right here in this location. Hey, about 30 to 32 thou, that's fine. All right, so I gotta kind of assemble everything now to do the forward drum. So I'll back it out. And for the forwards, all we're really looking for is solid apply. To be honest, you really don't even need to measure the clearance unless you have a reason to believe that it's like way off. And so I don't have a reason to believe that, so I'm going to just more or less measure it based on the apply itself. Alright, we'll pop off our resizing tools, and then what we need to do is fish the input shaft through the overdrive / forward drum assembly. I say forward drum and overdrive, it's actually just the overdrive assembly. Okay, want to make sure you're fully seated. You'll see the the angled portion of the lugs flush with the surface of the pressure plate. If it's you see any straight portion of that lug, if that's visible, then you're not all the way seated. Do this, unless you don't mind taking it apart again, go ahead and lube up your bushing on the front side of the coast clutch drum, and then just make sure that snap ring groove's fully exposed. Okay, for this we gotta reverse our snap rings, or snap ring pliers rather. And then we'll just put it on. So here's what I mean when you're going to be checking for end play. You're going to hear that first clunk, which is this. Alright, so I'm actually going to measure that with a dial indicator in a little bit so that we can record and take that into account for our end play check once we have the case fully assembled. It's a very heavy assembly, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the foot press, and then we'll go over there and we'll do our air checks. When you're introducing air into the forward clutch, you're also going to take a finger and plug the front of the input shaft. So otherwise, you might have air coming out. Okay, that's good apply. So I'm satisfied with the way the forward clutch is working. All right, back to the bench. Okay, the last remaining sub-assembly in the front of the transmission is going to be the overdrive section. So overdrive piston and overdrive piston housing, along with clutch pack, return spring, etc. I'll back it up just a little bit. All right, so you'll notice that I have the old lip seals still on the piston and the piston housing. My recommendation for you and also for me, because I haven't done one of these in a while, is if you're not familiar with the 4L80E, or maybe it's your first time, or you just simply like me haven't touched one of these things in several months, it's a good idea to keep these lip seals on there. You can put it through the jet wash, or power wash, or whatever you have. It's not going to hurt the seals. It's not going to destroy or whatever. They're not going to disintegrate. And the reason I say that is because the new lip seals are nearly identical in size, but they are not the same. One is slightly bigger than the other, and the larger seal actually goes on the piston, not the housing. So if you look, you'll notice here this is got the lip offset to the interior, whereas this one, the lip's offset, to the outside, to the right, whereas this one is offset to the left. So just take your first lip seal off. Make note of which direction the lip's pointed in. And this, for the piston, it's pointed this way toward the snap ring groove. And you see this here, the lip is offset to the right. So that means it's going to take this lip seal. Okay, just make sure you have it fully installed into the groove all the way around. Looks good. And then just install the other one pretty much in the same fashion. You can match them up. Out with the old, in with the new. So in this case, the lip will face you, assuming you're holding the piston like I am. All right, grab your direct drum, and what I'll do, because I don't have the special tools for these, there's a special Kent Moore piston install toolkit. Basically two plastic, large plastic rings that allow you to slip the two halves together pretty much seamlessly. But that tool's like, I want to say between $300 and $400 on eBay and other places. So I don't mess with it. I don't, I found another way to do this without using it. You get correct snap ring when I have that handy. So I'm going to lube up our lip seals. Go all the way around. And just you're gonna make it like this, and then what I'll do is I will turn it, the assembly like this, upside down. And I'll situate it on the drum. And then from there, what I'm first going to do is I'm going to come in here with the lip seal tool. I'm going to go all the way around, and I'll collapse the top seal as much as I can, and kind of get it in between the housing and the piston. And then from there, I'm going to actually come underneath with the lip seal tool up under here from the bottom and do the same thing. So let me move the camera a little bit so I can kind of have space, and then I'll begin. So the trick with this is you gotta keep this whole thing balanced on the drum. If it falls off, then you're starting all over. Apply slight downward pressure. It's like anything else, you don't want to force anything. There's a couple of guys, a couple of builders on YouTube that do this as well. They have another method. One of them actually puts this against his chest and then kind of applies the, goes around with the lip seal tool and kind of uses the force, pressing against his chest in combination of maneuvering the lip seal, and then he finds a way to slip it, the two halves fully together like that. I've never tried that method. I'll be honest, I don't know if I'd be any good at it, but he demonstrates it. He does a pretty good job of it. Okay, I think I have it as collapsed as I can get it from the top. So now what I got to do is come underneath of it. So I just come in here like this and go all the way around. Try to, slip past the housing, because that's really what I'm trying to do here, is collapse the lip seal that's on the piston into the housing. And I got a lip right there where it's not wanting to cooperate. And this could go on for quite a while. I mean, sometimes I get it real quick, but sometimes, or other times I should say, it takes several minutes to get done. You just want to apply mild to moderate downward pressure as you go all the way around it. Looks like it's pretty much all the way down on this side, but it's this side that's hung up. Oh. Looks like I lost my progress there. I think that was going to happen anyway because there was no way that this side here was coming down.
Yeah, it looks like it's just hanging up right in here.
So once I clear that wherever it's binding, it'll fully seat.
As long as you have a proper lip seal tool and you're not like a, you know, a barbarian with it, you're not going to cut the seal. You just got to be careful. I mean, that's basically the main thing. You just got to be careful. You know, as long as it takes, it is what it is. It's almost there, but this surface here has to be perfectly flush with the surface for the piston. There we go. So that's how it should look, and I know that took forever, but like I say, it's either you're paying with time or you're paying with money. And then this is no fun either. Gonna basically do the same thing, keep it on the drum, and do the best I can to collapse the snap ring into its groove as I go all the way around. Much as I hate to admit, I really shouldn't be doing this with gloves on because the gloves will like to get caught up in the groove. And that makes me look stupid. Okay. So what I have to do is I have to finagle this end a little bit, you know, about to here, so that these two ends are between these two locking tabs. All right. So to check apply, what we want to do is locate the narrow lug and put our steel with the notch in that lug. And obviously the, you know, big part of pressure plate goes in the large gap, and then you stick the snap ring like so. Okay, it's good apply. We'll measure clearance once it's in the case.
But as long as everything is, manufactured to what it's supposed to be in terms of spec, you won't have any problems with the Overdrive clutch pack getting clearance where you need it. All right. Okay, the last thing we're going to do with the sub-assemblies is assemble the gear train. Gear train is fairly straightforward, so what I'm going to do is, as I'm putting it together, you can kind of see what I'm doing and where I'm putting things, and I'll show close-ups whenever, they're warranted, but I'm going to mostly talk about the differences between first generation 91, 96 4L80s and second generation 97 and up 80s with respect to the gear train. So this way you have a good idea of what you can swap and not swap, and what to be on the lookout for and what not to do, because most of the time when it comes to gear train and a 4L80, especially when it comes to individually swapping parts, it's more about what not to do. So 4L80E gear train, like the TH400 before, it consists of everything from the center support on back. So that's your center support, your front and rear planet, or reaction and output carrier, as they are referred to by in the factory service manual, your intermediate shaft, your sun gear shaft, your output shaft, and all your bearings and thrust washers. So I'll start off the bat with respect to comparing gear trains between first and generation 4L80E, and state quite simply that they are not interchangeable either individually or as a service pack, not at all. So 9196 is first generation, 9196 first generation, 97 and up is considered second generation. Now within the second generation, we recognize two distinct vintages, and that is 97, 98 and 99 and up. 99 and up, they introduced a 41 thousandths shim. This shim was introduced to recenter the sun gear between the two planetary carriers. And the reason they had to do that was because they changed the design of the planets themselves. The little planetary gears, they made taller. So what I mean by that is, if you're looking at the front planet, for example, okay, the dimension from here to here is taller on this planet than it is on a 97 and 98 and every other 4L80E that was produced beforehand, as well as all the TH400s. So in order to accommodate that change, along the change in that planet as well as the rear planet, they had to make dimensional changes to pretty much every other part in that gear train. So you can identify a 99 up part based on, at least for the sun gear and the sun gear shaft, based on the identification grooves that are machined into the splines here on the sun gear shaft and into the teeth of the gears on both sides of the sun gear. Okay, if you don't see these grooves, then you know you're working with a sun gear or a sun gear shaft that is not 99 and up. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting everything together, and then, we'll, I guess, finish it up. I don't know what I was going to say. Now, if you have a 4L80 you're working on, let's just say it's a late model, I don't know, 2006, 2007, like this one, and, the gears are all grenaded, or, at least the front and the rear planet are no good, but you have access to a core from 97 or 98, and you harvest all of the gear train parts from that core, from the center support, the front and the rear planets, the ring gear, the intermediate shaft, the sun gear, and I think maybe only the output shaft, it doesn't matter. But let's just say all those other parts that I mentioned, other than the output shaft, let's just say that's good, because I don't believe that makes a difference. You can install that entire gear set as a service pack into your 0607 case and vice versa. All right, I'm gonna move the camera a little bit and then we'll begin. All right, first things first, gonna lube up our bearings. So here is our center support to sun gear bearing. So for these bearings that were loose like this, I'll just use the thick assembly lube. Let's get them all lubed up. Now this half here, the one that's real narrow, this actually goes in the back of the sun gear here. Now in some models, in the late, when I say some models, meaning 99 and up, the second vintage and the second generation, will be a lip here. Okay, right here, you see this journal surface? This will actually come up by about 40 or 41 thousandths. Some have it, some don't. This one did not. So it's not strictly speaking absolutely mandatory. So if you need to swap center supports, you want to make sure you're getting a center support though from the correct generation of gear trains so that you're not inadvertently causing an issue. All right, so we'll leave that on there for now and we'll keep that aside and then we'll lube up our next bearing. This bearing goes in between the ring gear and, well, I guess the ring gear and the rear planet, but it acts as a thrust bearing for the sun gear on the output side. So you'll notice here, see these little cutouts? These are lubrication cutouts that are not present on anything first generation. So just take your top of it, stick it in there like that, and that's how it goes. And then your shim is going to go underneath. And lastly, your ring gear to output shaft bearing. Okay, here's your top hat. Okay, here's the back of the ring gear. The top hat is going to go like this. Then your bearing will follow. Let's get it nice and lubed up. And then you put the cap on. Okay, take your new low roller assembly. And then carefully lift it into place into the front planet. So nice that I'd done that initially. All right, keep your little snap ring handy. All right, so remember, we're gonna take this thrust washer and delete it. And then we're gonna use this thrust washer here that normally goes on the back of the output shaft, and we're gonna stick it on the front of the rear planet. And then we're gonna put, I'm gonna put 2 shims. In my experience, 2 of these shims is like ideal. And then we'll go and test it once everything's together and see if the travel or the play between these 2 planets is acceptable or not. Actually, you know what? They're thicker than the other shims I used last time. So let me put 1 shim, and we'll start out with 1 shim and see where that takes us. All right. So first what we need to do is assemble our ring gear for the rear and the intermediate shaft. And you notice here there's lube cutouts. Okay, again, that's second generation. First generation does not have that. Okay, we'll put our bearing. And again, don't forget our shim. All right, now I'm going to change camera angles so that we can set everything up. I'm going to put the rear planet face down on the, whatchamacallit, on the foot press, and then we're going to, you know, kind of mesh this assembly with the rear planet. I'll make sure you can see what I'm doing. Okay, rear planet face down. I'm gonna get rid of those shims for a second. And then take your ring gear / intermediate shaft, carefully lower it in, and let it mesh. All right, now we're going to take our output shaft, I'm going to lube the bearing, or excuse me, the bushing. And in it goes. And then we'll fish for the snap ring, which is under the center support. I'm going to move this up just a little bit. All right, go ahead and install the snap ring. Just make sure it's engaged all the way around and then drop it in. And now let's turn the assembly right side up. And then I'm going to grab the front planet, the low roller installed. Now grab your 2-tab washer and your shim. This is a 15th thou shim. And just make sure it's fully seated, and then grab your planet. And mesh it with the rear planet. Okay, next step is going to be your sun gear and sun gear shaft. So these beveled splines have to face rearward or downward. And then you want to make sure you line up your 2 lube holes. So sun gear shaft, this faces rearward or down. And you just want to make sure that they're aligned. So best way to check is just use a flashlight. And you want to make sure you can see that light clearly visible poking out of the sun gear there. So here's how it looks assembled. We'll put a little bit of assembly lube on the bushing. bushings. Put a little bit on the gears and the splines as well. And we're also going to lube up front planet bushing, which I should have done before I dropped it in, but better late than never. Okay, make sure when you drop it in, you do the best you can to ensure that the sun gear and sun gear shafts stay together. Okay, if you're not sure, just, pull it back out and check it. Okay, next is going to be center support. So first, you have your center support thrust bearing. So just like this. And then you want to make sure that you have your front bearing race installed onto the center support. This one came off as I was moving stuff around on the bench. So lube up your center support bushing. And install the race as shown. Make sure that your thrust washer is also installed. And then when you drop it in, or drop it on rather, you're going to rotate counterclockwise so that the inner race meshes with the low roller. And new low rollers, it'll be sometimes a little bit of an effort to get it to, fully seat, but, it'll go. All right, just want to double check the bench, make sure that there's nothing that is on the bench that should be in this assembled gear train. I don't see anything. We do have an additional shim just in case we have too much travel still between the front and rear planet. So what we're going to do now is take this over to the other bench, chuck it up in a vise, and then I'm going to also drop in the direct drum and the forward hub so that we can measure and gauge the travel between the two planets, as well as the travel that exists between the direct drum and the forward hub. So in a 480E, you want to make sure that both of those 2 points are not sloppy. Okay, you want a little bit of movement between them, but you don't want excessive movement. And unfortunately, there's no real clear spec for this. It's just all by feel. So, it'll be more of a visual and by feel thing. So when we get over there, we'll show you. Late model 480E. We have the entire gear train chucked up in the vise here along with the direct drum and the forward hub. And what we want to do is measure the travel between the reaction carrier and output carrier, aka front and rear planet. We also want to measure the amount of travel or quote-unquote slop between the direct drum and the forward hub. So I have with me a couple of 10,000 shims. Okay, this shim here in my left hand is going to be for placement under the 2-tab thrust washer that sits on top of the rear planet. We have swapped that original plastic washer for the Babbitt washer that normally sits on the output shaft, since we're going to rollerize this transmission, the rear of the case. We also have a 10,000 shim that we can place underneath the bearing that's on this billet steel hub to kind of take up any slop that exists between the drum and the forward hub there. All right, so to measure this, as far as measuring front and rear planet slop, what you're going to do is you're going to take your two hands, press down on the center support while lifting up on the front planet until it comes in contact with the center support. Okay, as of right now, I literally have 0 play, so 0 travels just as bad. So we're going to want to take out the shim that's been installed and swap it with this shim, because I believe the shim that we installed was 15 thou, but we'll have to check for sure once I get it apart. Okay, so there's no movement whatsoever. All right, now we're going to do the same test but with the forward hub. So again, you're going to grab onto the forward hub like so, both hands, and then you're going to pull up from underneath the forward, or the direct drum rather. Okay, that has a fair amount of movement, and when I say a fair amount, it feels about like it's between, I don't know, 40 and 50 thousandths of an inch or so, maybe 30 thou on the low end. Alright, so here is the bearing. You would normally have your plastic thrust washer here, but because we're running a billet rollerized hub, that thrust washer has been deleted. And clean it up. And we're going to put our 10 thousand shim. It's just going to go right here, and then we'll put the bearing. So when you do this, you're effectively going to change the front end play figure by 10 thousandths less, because there's going to be 10 thousandths less travel that this whole assembly will have to make between its location here and, you know, the bottom of that selective thrust washer on the back of the pump. So let's try it again. Okay, that's a lot better. Cut it in half, which is fine, you know, for what we're trying to achieve. This isn't strictly speaking 100% necessary for a stock or very mild build, but if we're building up something for performance, then you want to go through both of these steps. And in this case, we're building up a you know, 4L80 for street strip use. So it's going to see the track occasionally, so we want to make sure it's, you know, set up nice and tight, but not too tight as, you know, what we have down here. But we want to set it up nice and tight so we get rid of the slop. All right, so now I'm going to take the top part of this assembly off. I'm going to take the center support off. And don't worry about your sun gear and sun gear shaft coming out of mesh. If it happens, I mean, you know, you're going to have everything off anyway, so you're going to double check it before you put it back on for the final time. And sometimes that bearing likes to get caught up, just FYI. Okay, so here's a thrust washer that came off the back of the center support. So just make sure that that goes back on as well. All right, let's see what shim we have under here. So that's 15 thousandths. I'm not sure this is going to make much of a difference. There may be very little slop just, you know, quote unquote naturally by just this Babbitt washer. So if that's the case, then so be it. I mean, I don't have to use a shim. And you just set it in there, make sure it's nice and flat. Hey, if you want to double check your sun gear shaft, make sure that you could see light through that little loophole. Follow up with your bearing. And then just make sure you still have your upper race or front race for that bearing on the center sport. Oop. Like the little Babbitt thrust washer was left behind. If you forget that, that will throw off the measurements. So hopefully it stays put. Okay, always go in a counterclockwise direction when mating the center support with the high planet. All right, let's try it again. And you don't need the direct drum and the hub for this. You can just test this, the planets in the center support. Okay, I still have literally no movement. So I'm gonna actually take that other shim out. Now, worst case, if for whatever reason the Babbitt, the Babbitt thrust washer is too thick, then I'll just put the plastic one back on. I mean, there's no, it's not really a durability question with the plastic one. It's more of the Babbitt is a little bit more stout, so it might be a little more advantageous. But hey, if it's too thick, then you don't want to install it. Okay, just remating the sun gear shaft, checking to make sure that those loop ports are lined up. Looks like I'm going to need to put a little bit more assembly lube on that thrust washer. Alright, no shims. Let's see what happens. Okay, you can hear it. See if I can do it in a way that you can see it. Okay. We're gonna live with that. I don't have any shims that are thinner, and the plastic thrust washer, I'll measure it real quick. In fact, let me do that. Let me measure the plastic thrust washer and see if it's thinner at all compared to the Babbitt one. I think we said the Babbitt one was 65 thousandths. This is 60 thousandths, so I'm gonna leave the Babbitt thrust washer in there. If this was a little bit thicker, maybe 70 thou, then I would put this one back in. It would just take up a little bit more play, but I'm good with how this feels. I mean, sometimes you're not gonna get, the play perfect, but you want to make sure, double check it. You want to go through this step just to ensure that you got everything accounted for, because a lot of people won't do this. They'll check the rear gear train end play, and then they'll check the front end play, but they won't check, the travel between the planets, and the travel that exists between the direct drum and the forward hub. So it's important that you incorporate this step into your QC process for any 4L80.